Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the United She Stands podcast. Today we have, I think, our first ever judge. Is that right, Sarah?
100%, yes.
First ever judge as a guest, and that judge is Judge Myron Duhart. We're really excited for you to hear from him today, so I'm going to give you a little bit of his background before we dive into the interview. Judge Duhart is a native of Toledo, Ohio. He is the proud father of 3 and has been married to his wife, Nicole, for 29 years. Judge Duhart grew up in the Central City. He graduated from St. Francis de Sales High School, and after graduation, he enlisted in the U.S. Army and was later commissioned as a lieutenant in the Army Judge Advocate General Corps, or JAG. While serving his country, he earned a BA in political science from Wright State University in Dayton, Ohio, and went on to receive his JD from the University of Toledo College of Law. Judge Duhart received a L.L.M in judicial studies from Duke University School of Law, and he attended the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. Judge Duhart has also been a longtime adjunct lecturer in law at the University of Toledo College of Law, where he teaches trial practice. Throughout his legal career, he litigated a number of high-profile criminal cases all over Northwest Ohio and was one of a select cadre of attorneys certified by the state of Ohio to handle death penalty cases. He has been admitted to practice in the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Ohio, U.S. Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit, and the United States Supreme Court. In January 2011, Judge Duhart was appointed by former Governor Ted Strickland as one of 10 judges who serve on the Lucas County Court of Common Pleas bench. In addition to hearing serious felony criminal cases and large civil cases, Judge Duhart has served as a commercial docket judge hearing cases dealing with business-related disputes. In 2020, Judge Duhart was elected to the Court of Appeals, where he served as presiding judge. As an Army veteran, Judge Duhart served this country with distinction. As an attorney, he has worked tirelessly to protect the rights afforded to citizens, both rich and poor. And as a volunteer, he has unselfishly devoted his time and talent to a wide variety of causes. As a judge on the 6th District Court of Appeals, he continues to act with fairness and integrity, and you'll get to hear all about that from him personally today and how he's up for re-election this year. Enjoy.
Welcome, Judge Duhart. We're so excited to have you today.
Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. And, I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So let's start very basic. What put you on the path to law in the first place, and how did your time as an Army JAG officer shape the judge that you have become?
Sure. Well, thank you for the question. When I think about, over the course of my career and what it was that inspired me to pursue a career in law, a number of things that come to mind, but I think the thing that's most made an impression on me is, I grew up in a time in the 70s and 80s where in certain communities, I saw how the law had a disparate impact. And that inspired me. Those are things that imprint on you when you're a very young person. And, I thought that innately some of these things were unfair. And I always said and told myself that at one point, and when I get an opportunity, we're going to do something about it. And so that's kind of what the path was and what the original impetus was for me to pursue law. JAG. Oh, so you guys have looked at my background a little bit, huh?
We did a little research, yeah.
All right, all right. Well, what I did, I enlisted in the Army right out of high school. I was very young. And in retrospect, it was one of the best decisions I ever made because as a fairly young person, it taught me a couple things. One of which is you are put in very high stressful circumstances with individuals from all social economic backgrounds. You're given an objective, very limited resources, very limited instruction, and they say, go get it done. And so what it does is it teaches you at a very young age, how to be accountable to folks, how to be responsible to folks, and how to reach out and, get things done without being one side of the tracks or another side of the tracks. And frankly, I think when I think about that, that really sort of laid a path to what I do today, which, we'll get into, and that's the Court of Appeals. And before that, I was on the trial court. But, when I think about that, in today's world, being a judge isn't about being loyal to one side or the other or it being political. What it's about is a mutual goal, right? right? Giving an objective, trying to figure out a resolution for the parties involved, and finding a way to get that done in a fair and considered rather way. And so, when I think back, the military was really, really good for me.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So
Yeah.
let's talk about your current role. For people who've never set foot in a courtroom past maybe like
Mhm.
a traffic court example or being a juror or something like that, what exactly does the Sixth District Court of Appeals do? And how is it different? How is your job different from a trial judge's, which you mentioned you've also done?
You see me smiling, don't you? And so
Yeah, I
I
do.
love I love when I get that question because for the vast majority of folks, they know or have an idea what the trial courts do. That's usually, everything from traffic court to divorce court, juvenile court, etc. And I think most people understand what the Supreme Court does, or at least what they think they do. And very few understand what the Court of Appeals does. And so, my district, which is the Sixth District Court of Appeals, there are 12 appellate districts in Ohio. We, or at least the one in which I sit in, is 6 of 12, and that includes 8 different counties. And so I go as far west as Williams County, as far east as Erie County, and as far south as Fulton County. So it's a large district. Now, what happens is there is a decision that is made in the lower courts, and if one wants to challenge that decision, they have a right to file an appeal. And so you might imagine all those trial courts in those 8 different counties, to include traffic cases, domestic cases, business litigation, government regulation, all of that appeals are being filed. And we are hearing them, at least the ones that are filed here in this particular district. And so here's what I like, the best metaphor or analogy I can come up with, and I say this to folks all the time. I don't know if you all are sports fans or not. Have you all played any sports or have any interest in sports, at least watch from afar?
Oh,
We
yeah.
just
We,
had,
yep.
yes, good.
Yes.
Well, and most, whether you've played or had some involvement or not, you at least watch. And so, whatever sport you are watching, something happens on the field or on the court or on the pitch, one of the players or one of the teams, they want to challenge whatever the decision was that was made on the field, the court, the pitch. The referee then goes to the instant replay or the cameras or whatever it is, with the benefit of time and resources to try and take a look and see whether or not the call that was made on the field, and in this case, in the courtroom, was the right decision. So, what we do in the Court of Appeals is the instant replay of judicial decisions. Okay?
I like that.
That is
That's a good
actually
analogy.
that
Yeah.
is so helpful. Truly.
Yeah.
We were talking before we started recording, and we're like, this episode is just as much for us as it is for our audience, because the
Sure.
courts is something that we are very it's a big question mark for us, truly.
Of course.
I
And
want to
for
ask you
most
a
people.
follow-up.
Yes. Of
Yeah.
course.
So when it comes to all of the appeals you receive, do you actually hear them all, or do you have to decide which ones you're taking?
No, and that's a great question as well. And so, what many folks don't realize is that the Court of Appeals, we, in most cases, are the court of last resort. And so, what do I mean by that? The Ohio Supreme Court, which is the highest court in Ohio, they only take a select few cases that are on appeal. In fact, they only take maybe 1 in 10 of all the appellate cases that are filed, not only in the 6th district, but the other 12 districts. They only take 1 in 10 of those cases. And so when a case is filed in the Court of Appeals, and in particular the 6th District Court of Appeals, it is we who are on the Court of Appeals, we most of the time are making the final decision. And so we're acting as and I want to walk politely when I say this because we are not the Ohio Supreme Court, but many times we are making the final decision in the case in the event that the Supreme Court does not accept that particular case. And so we don't relitigate a case. We don't take new evidence. What we are attempting to do when a case is filed and appealed, there are two things that I'm really, and the other two judges who sit on the case and on the panel with me, the two goalposts that or pillars of which we are looking to do is number one, decide and determine based upon the evidence and the record that is already in existence to include transcripts or exhibits that were admitted at the time of the trial. We're looking to see whether or not the process was fair and whether or not the right law was applied. And so those are the two things that we are really looking to do, when a case comes in front of us. And again, with the benefit of time and resources, we like to think that, we're going to do whatever it takes to get the decision, the right decision.
So you hear every appeal that comes to you?
We do, unless when you say here, we decide on every case that comes to us.
Okay,
Some cases, when they do file an appeal, some lawyers and litigants, they don't require nor do they request a hearing. So although there is an appeal that is in front of us and we ultimately make a decision, we may not hear oral arguments.
That's still a lot. That has to be a ton of cases. When do you go to sleep?
Well, yeah, it's a lot, but that's okay. That's part of the job.
Do you have any numbers on like how many cases you guys, it comes across your desk a year or anything like that off the top of your head? I'm sorry, we didn't prepare this.
No. There are 5 judges, and I would say that each of us, we are deciding or part of a panel that decides 400 to 500 cases a year. So if you divided that by 12 months, then that's generally what we hear. Now, that number fluctuates, and obviously, depending upon just the volume for that particular year. But, we, at least the Court of Appeals in the 6th District in particular, I think we are very much in line with the volume of cases in the other districts.
Gotcha. That's a ton of cases.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and this may be a great time to sort of, lay out for your listeners and your audience how this whole process essentially works. And so, again, there's a decision that's made in the trial court. One side or the other, is not happy with that decision. They then initially file a notice of appeal. That essentially they're signaling to us that an appeal will be forthcoming. Once we get that notice of appeal, 2 things are happening. We as a court are setting a briefing schedule, right? So this will be a timeline as to both sides, when and how they are to submit written arguments and to identify what it is that they wish to challenge on a chronological timeline, as well as we give them time to provide the record to us. Now, again, what is the record? It is the dispositive motions that were ruled upon at the lower court level, transcripts, exhibits to include pictures or other items that were in the record. And so those then get transferred to us. Once this schedule and this time has elapsed, then we set the case for argument if argument is requested. This is an opportunity for the lawyers then to be able to come in and argue to us about what it is that they wish to challenge. And so the timeline, generally speaking, is about 6 months from the time in which the case is initially filed. We will get the written arguments about 2 or 3 months in advance. We read those arguments in anticipation and preparation for those arguments. And then the lawyers get to come in and try and persuade us as to why it is that we should consider what it is that they're challenging. And so after arguments are over, we, the judges, and there are 3 of us that sit on each of the cases, we will go in and conference with each other with an idea of coming to some sort of consensus as to what we think is the right thing to do and the right way to go. And then there is a writing judge who is assigned to putting together an opinion or a draft of the opinion consistent with what we thought collectively was the right way to go. Again, fairness and whether or not the law was applied correctly being the goalpost. And then we issue a decision. And so that is essentially what the process is.
That I maybe could have pieced that together myself, but just, I don't know. I feel like the courts is always such an intimidating thing for me. So that's very helpful. When it comes to the cases, though, are there any particular kinds of cases or community concerns that show up again and again in your region of Northwest Ohio and the 8 counties that are in your district?
No, there's no particular case that comes up with a high level of frequency. As I said before, we see a wide array of cases that come before us. Everything from criminal cases to civil cases, business litigation, landlord tenant, divorce, juvenile, you name it. And so sort of the beauty of the Court of Appeals and appellate courts in general is that you get a very, very wide ranging number of cases that come before you. And to be honest with you, it's challenging, but also rewarding because there are things of which are novel and you need to get up to speed and certainly educate yourself, your staff, and sometimes the other judges who are on the panel in that particular area of law. And I find that very rewarding, that exercise of doing that.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite type of case to work on? Like when you get a new case across your desk and it's XYZ topic, you're like, oh, nice.
No, I'm not that over. But what I will say is I do get excited about novel issues. And so, yes, do we see reoccurring issues that come up? Yes, different case, but reoccurring issues. Whether or not the lawyer who was representing a particular litigant, whether or not they did a good job or not, or there was some reason that they were ineffective in their representation, that sort of comes up a lot and some other things. But when there's a novel issue that comes up that doesn't come up with a great deal of frequency, yeah, you get excited about that. And, short of talking about cases in particular, cases that are dealing with societal impact, right? Or civil liberties, or those kind of cases that not only are affecting the litigants in the particular case, but may have broader or wide ranging implications as a result of your decision. And so those type of cases are always cases of which, have some impact and I like to see coming my way.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So looking back on your time so far on the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, is there a case, and I know you probably can't talk specifics, but a case or a body of decisions you'd point to as the clearest example of the impact you've been able to have?
Well, again, I think I would default to cases dealing with civil liberties, Fourth Amendment cases, search and seizure, First Amendment cases dealing with free speech and, right to privacy, those kind of things. You get an opportunity really in making these decisions again to take into account what is happening not only in the case itself right now, but you also get a chance to go back historically when you were going through the case, trying to figure out the best way to go. You get the opportunity to go back to see what the historical significance was of that particular civil right or, constitutional right, First Amendment right. So what was happening at the time of the First Amendment? What were the drafters thinking? What was the intent? And, does that intent apply to today? And if it doesn't, how best to proceed, etc. And so those are the kind of cases that, I think are very, very much impactful and, what's going on. And you all are seeing a lot of this stuff play out every single day. And so as of late. Let me
Mhm.
let me give you that caveat. And so, if there was ever a time, at least in you all's life, and I can't think of a time, civil rights era, the 1960s, in the 1970s, I don't think there's been a time, again, in recent history where you are seeing what appellate court judges do. Not
Yeah.
only the Supreme Court, the federal Supreme Court, which is the highest court in the land, the Ohio Supreme Court, and the appellate courts at the federal and at the state court level. You all are seeing it play out, and everyone else is seeing it play out live and in color. And so, if there
Yeah.
was ever a time that people should pay attention to at least what the appellate judges do and how, these things affect your daily and everyday life, now would be the time.
Yeah. It is
Yeah.
important, right? Who sits on your appellate courts? It's very important,
Yeah.
as we've been able to see.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure.
Absolutely a great call out. It's bittersweet that it's, a time to pay attention to this, but yeah, nonetheless, we are paying attention. So as presiding judge, you've had a hand in shaping how the court itself runs and not just how cases get decided. What's
Mhm.
something that you've changed or pushed for that you're particularly proud of?
Well, I educating the public, frankly, as I have done with you all, and your audience. Again, many people don't understand and appreciate, I guess, what the Court of Appeals does. And so, when I was presiding judge, we made a very concerted effort to get out to the public. We hold court not only in the physical building that we are in, but we also go to the law school. We hold court at the law school. We hold court at the paralegal school in Toledo, and then we go out to the other counties as well, and we will hold court in those particular courthouses in the 8 counties that the district is comprised of. And so the point of all that is to make the court and what we do more accessible to everyday folks to come in, if they have an interest in understanding beyond the litigants. If they have an interest in understanding what we do, the public can come in and see and sit in on the cases that we have scheduled that day. And to be honest with you, I'm extremely proud of that. Why? In my 30 some years of being in this law business, I've come to the conclusion, and many who are lawyers and or judges feel, I believe, the same. Sometimes it's the perception of justice is just as important as actual justice, right? So it's the perception of fairness that is just as important than what's actually going on, right? And so I'm very cognizant of that, and I think as a judge and lawyers in particular as well, we need to be cognizant of that because, frankly, the third branch of government, we don't have the power of the purse. We don't have the power of the sword. What we have is the trust of citizens and regular everyday folks. And so if you don't have that trust, we're in trouble. And so
Yeah.
I do everything I can to, in my individual capacity, but also when I was leading the Court of Appeals here, to get out there in the community and bolster the public trust in what we do.
Yeah, I think that's incredible. That's really, I think we always try to talk about how we make politics more accessible to normal
Hmm.
people, how right people can engage more easily. So I really love that
Hmm.
that you
Hmm.
guys spend time doing that.
Hmm.
So we're going to start to wrap up, but before we do, I want to ask you, what do you think people get wrong or misunderstand about judges, and specifically about how much a single seat on a court like the 6th district can actually shape someone's life?
Well, and I alluded to, it's a great question, by the way. I alluded to it earlier. What people should know and understand is appellate judges, as well as trial court judges, but, in particular, appellate court judges do have a very influential impact on your everyday life. You may not see what we do every single day. You may not see us when you get a traffic ticket or, there's a landlord tenant issue. But we as appellate court judges, we have a very heavy impact, I guess, on what it is that you all are experiencing every single day. And so let me give you a couple examples of that. I guess that's the better way. Sometimes we as judges, we have to be very careful in what we say. And so I'm always trying to be cognizant of that. But sometimes examples are better than others. And so, again, what you are seeing are decisions being made with respect to citizens' ability to exercise their franchise to vote. So, depending on what side of the issue you are on, some would argue that there are efforts being made to restrict your exercise to vote. Some would argue the converse of that, right? And so, that's an example at the federal level and at the state level. All right. How about women's health and reproductive rights? And so there were some pretty strong decisions that were made in the federal court level, a couple years ago that now are very much within the states. Right. And so the decision is that many of these types of issues will be left up to the state to make decisions regarding those particular issues. Now, why does that matter? Well, the appellate court judges in that particular state now are vested with more authority to have an impact on those particular issues. And so, again, that's another example of folks needing to understand who their appellate court judges are. And then, I can give you another example that is happening right now in real time. Just about a year ago in Columbus, Ohio, in Franklin County, the public school funding was an issue. And the trial court judge in Franklin County had to decide whether or not ed choice and the funding consistent with public education was unconstitutional. All right, this is something that affects everyone and everyone's tax dollars across the board. Doesn't matter what side you're on. That trial court judge in Franklin County decided that ed choice and the way in which public school funding is being allocated at this point violates the Ohio Constitution, essentially unconstitutional. That was a year ago. Just about 2 months ago, of course, the case was appealed, and the 10th District Court of Appeals is the appellate court that heard the appeal. And as a result of that appeal, they are going to make a decision as to whether or not to affirm or agree with the lower court that ed choice, as it is implemented now, is unconstitutional, or they're going to reverse the lower court. All right. And so why am I bringing up this example? Well, if that case had originated in one of the 8 counties that the 6th district is in, well, guess what judge and court would be hearing that case right now? I see you, Ashley. So these are the things that matter, right? And so those are just 3 examples to illustrate the point, how it is at the Court of Appeals, and in particular the 6th District Court of Appeals, and the judges on that court do have a impact on everyday lives of individuals.
Yeah, those are great examples because we've all lived through them.
I was just going to say, those are like top topics that we talk about in Ohio politics all the time. So thank you for making that tie to the courts.
Of course. Glad to do it.
Yeah. So you're heading into a re-election campaign. For folks that are excited from this interview and maybe also live in Northwest Ohio, or really anyone, how can they help or get involved, and where can they find more information about you and your campaign?
Well, thank you. We have a website. It's www.judgeduhart.com. We also have a pretty robust Facebook page, and so that's Judge Myron Duhart on Facebook. And, we have an Instagram. I don't do a whole lot with Instagram, but I'm trying to keep up with the times. But those are the 3 easiest places to contact us if you want more information and or you wish to help in whatever capacity that they deem or you deem appropriate. And so I would encourage all of your audience and listeners, again, and it may sound like a call to action, but understand who the judges are that are on the Court of Appeals, and in particular the Sixth District Court of Appeals. I would venture to say, some would say, not me, some would say that the reason why you are seeing things of which are quite concerning and troubling now is because, supermajorities in each of the branches of government. And so judges in the third branch of government historically have served as a check and balance, keyword being balance, as to the other two branches of government. And when you don't have, in particular, judges who represent the broad spectrum, political spectrum that sit on the court, then you have a supermajority essentially on the court as well. And many would argue, the system wasn't designed for those supermajorities. And I would argue you certainly don't want that to be the case on courts for all the reasons that we have discussed today. So I'll get off my soapbox there, and I'll send that call to action out there and leave it there.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I know we, as a judge, you have to keep it, I'll say apolitical, I guess, or
Yes.
non-political, nonpartisan.
Yes.
But we'll just say we harp
if
on
I
the
can,
supermajority situation a lot. So feel free to get on your soapbox anytime you want.
Yes, we talk about the supermajority in Ohio all the time, and not in good light.
yeah. Well, if you will allow me to drive home the point,
Yeah.
the Ohio legislature in 2022 changed the law to put party designation on the ballot for judges, only for appellate judges, that is on the Court of Appeals and the Ohio Supreme Court. And so I think it would be disingenuous and naive to think that there are not disingenuous reasons for that. The point being is that, again, your listeners and your audience understand what's going on with that. Again, frankly, I think judges should be nonpartisan because I think it's a disservice to the judge. It's a disservice to their experience, their qualifications, whether or not they're fair. I think most well-intended individuals, no matter whatever side of the political spectrum you're on, would all agree that, if they have some sort of issue or controversy, or they wish to have their day in court, they just want a judge who's fair, who's experienced, who's qualified, right? Who's respected in the community and by other lawyers, etc. That's what you want. And I think sometimes, these activities to highly politicize and/or make judicial races highly partisan, there are a lot of negative consequences as a result of that. So thank you for letting me get that in.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us today. We learned a ton. I know everyone listening will learn a ton as well. And we wish you the absolute best in your reelection campaign. We will be rooting for and supporting you in any way we can.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure, talking to you, Sarah and Ashley. And thank you so much.
Thanks, Judge Duhart.